Tonight, we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score, which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight, we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats, football history and its memorabilia on the Sports History Network. And we're live from the Southport, North Carolina home of Gridiron Greats magazine. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America that focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 150 plus years of football history and memorabilia, and you'll find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. So at this time, I'd like to introduce my co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats magazine, a football memorabilia historian, specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Larger. He hails from Portland, Oregon, Mr. Joe Squires. Joe, welcome to the show.
Great to be back, Bob. Holidays in our rearview mirror, Christmas, New Year's Eve. Been texting you. I officially moved into my house after repairs from our fire. So it's a little hectic. It's like the Death Star in Star Wars. I mean, it's not quite complete, but we could blow up Alderaan if we had to.
All right, good. I'm glad you're back in, and I'm glad things are getting a little normal. We're going to have a general open forum, but we're going to do a bunch of stuff during the show tonight, this afternoon. And I want to lead off a little off script. It's not a good idea to be old in football right now. And as I fast approach that number of 70, I really feel for three guys who, two losing their jobs, one gracefully exiting at the same time. And I think we all know in the football world, Nick Saban, Bill Belichick, and a man who I've never seen chew gum better than the illustrious Pete Carroll of your Seattle Seahawks. Thoughts, ideas, concepts.
You literally broke the news to me about Pete Carroll being let go. For our listeners, Bob texted me yesterday where we text quite a bit. He's like, "Hey, I'm sorry to hear about Pete Carroll being let go." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" I mean, so yeah. Bob Swick, Gridiron Great publisher, podcaster, and breaking news now. But I'm reminded of the greats. I mean, Lombardi, was amazing, and at some point, people figured out what he had. Football evolved around him. I mean, think of every great you can. Bill Walsh got let go at some point or retired. I mean, Mike Holmgren, all the greats you can think about at some point, the world passes them by, and football evolves. It's, I think we can say Bill Belichick, probably the greatest to ever roam the sidelines. I mean, would you put him above Lombardi?
Well, yes and no. I think in the context and in the years that they played, I think Belichick did a lot. He was beyond, in any way, shape, or form, a genius in many cases as far as the game was concerned and his strategies and so on and so forth. He did slip when he lost Brady. And
yes,
to me, Lombardi unfortunately never lived long enough to slip anywhere because he even did a good job with the Redskins, the short time.
With Sonny.
I look at these guys, I look at Belichick especially. I think Belichick, if he wanted complete control of his team from top to bottom, and he had it. But I don't think it was effective once he lost Brady. He just couldn't come up with the magic again with any quarterback that he had there. And he really didn't have that great quarterbacks to use and utilize. Nick Saban, as far as I'm concerned, the guy was great. He was a great coach. I can't take anything away from him. I didn't like the way he schlepped for Affleck at the end there, doing the promotions. I thought that was a little You know, I
Beneath
don't
it,
know why you
beneath
needed.
it. Isn't that funny? I feel the same way where I'm like, come on, man, you don't need the money that bad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you lose some credibility doing that.
Yes.
Pete Carroll's Pete Carroll. I remember him from both the Patriots and the Jets when he was there.
Yeah,
He was not well liked in either area. I think he
correct.
found his niche at USC, and he did find his niche with the Seahawks. And I think Carroll was the most surprised because I think he probably wanted to go out on his terms. Obviously, he was not able to go out on his terms, and that ended that for him. And that's what what it comes down
Yeah,
to. So the problem I see with Belichick going to another team, I really can't see him. And I hate to say this, at his age and going with a completely different organization. A, any organization is going to give him top to bottom control, and B, he's not going to alienate a lot of guys both in the organization, playing for him, coaching, support staff, things of that nature. And I think that's going to be his drawback to going to any other team. I really can't see him, and as much as they're hyping this morning, he's going to go to the Falcons. I really don't see why the Falcons would want to pick him up. They don't have that great of a team. They're probably good 3 to 4 years down the road before they become truly competitive again.
totally agree.
I can't see him with the Redskins Commanders because that's a completely different situation there. And he's just not going to gel there. He's not going to fit in well there. Panthers, forget. I just can't see him going to Carolina.
That would tarnish his legacy to go to a team that's already losing like that. Yeah.
So I get he's not going to turn anything around there whatsoever.
Yes.
They need basically a cleaning top to bottom. So Belichick, I just think, I always say when you're on top, that's the time to step down. It's the greatest feeling around, and I use it in my own case when we moved down here. I was pretty much at the top of the different things I was doing back in Connecticut. And I walked away from them. People say, you're crazy walking away from them. I said, well, I don't know what else more I could do here and or accomplish here. I've done this, and this. I'm done. It's time for another chapter, a new change, a new location, so on and so forth. And I think a lot of guys in football, they just can't give it up. I mean, the players can't give it up. Look at Aaron Rodgers. It was a total waste of a season. And if he really thinks he's going to come back and the Jets are somehow going to win the Super Bowl next year, I can't see that happening either. So, I think these three guys, Saban, I know is pretty much done, but I think Carroll and Belichick should just say, hey, I had a great ride. Time to do something different, or maybe find a high school that really needs you and go there. And seriously, and give 60 years of experience to kids, high school kids, and let them say at one time, hey, Bill Belichick or Pete Carroll coached us, type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's just my feeling on it, one way or the other.
Yeah. Legacy is big to me. For example, I remember when you were talking about moving, you're like, once I get permission from my parole officer, we're moving, there you go. You've got your big reset.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. So it's it is what it is, and I think people sometimes have difficulty changing. I went to high school with guys who still live in the same town I graduated from, and they have never moved, half a million in their life, typically.
Hoodie's got his reputation. He's the greatest. What he doesn't want to do is pull a Johnny Unitas and go play a year at the Chargers. I think we all abhor seeing our heroes in another uniform. Jerry Rice looked amazing in a Seahawk uniform. Of course, everybody does wearing number 80, but that tarnishes a reputation. It really does. Lombardi is seen as the greatest. There's a lot of people who don't remember that he left to go, to the Redskins for a little while, and who said, by the way, that Sonny Jurgensen was the greatest player he ever played with, which I thought was interesting. Greatest quarterback, excuse me, outside of Kramer. But Hoodie's got his reputation to worry about too. He doesn't want to go. The teams you mentioned, 100% agree, because he won't go to the Falcons, where he spends 3 years mired, in mediocrity,
Right.
with some, sub 500 seasons, never making the playoffs, and he backs out of his career. That is a state.
Right.
But Robert Kraft did a great job in his speech yesterday, where he's like, Bill's in charge of everything: draft picks, general manager, salaries, everything.
Right.
So to take some of those duties away from him is an insult to him. So does Hoodie want to go somewhere where he is the same, where he has all of those responsibilities, and does having all of those responsibilities detract from coaching? It's the same thing happened to Holmgren in Seattle. It started to detract from the coaching when you have all the other stuff to worry about.
Right, exactly. And I think the last 3 years proved to Belichick, he was, literally, he wasn't making good decisions with drafts and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's not so much you lost your spark or you lost your touch. It's just that you can't handle everything from top to bottom the way you think you can handle from top to bottom, even as much as you delegate to your coaches. And again, because football is so overcoached today, what is the role of a head coach for any team today? Basically, all he is an admin for coordinating 12 to 14 different coaches and plays and trying to make them work for 60 minutes on a game day and see if he can win. And that's what it comes down to. And again, who were the powerful teams in the NFL this year? The Ravens, which shocked me because I really didn't think they were that good. 49ers, who I did think they were good. And I saw the complete implosion of the Philadelphia Eagles this year, who were supposed to be, walking into the Super Bowl right now.
Yeah, the Seahawks beat them.
So
the Seahawks beat the Eagles. I mean, it's just they started to coast. And you also saw a lot of coasting. I mean, what the juggernauts that we've had. I mean, the Chiefs. I mean, a lot of whining, a lot of finger pointing towards the end there. That really tears teams apart.
And to me, the Chiefs just got too many outside interests, and it's not so much, the Taylor Swift type of thing. It's basically Mahomes spent pretty much his off season recording a lot of commercials, doing a lot of promotional work, blah blah blah. And I think guys got a little disinterested on that team, and Andy Reid's having a tough time drawing everybody in. And he's an old school coach, in my opinion, and he's a player coach.
Totally agree.
So he's saying to himself, I should have one of the best teams in the NFL, and look at the infighting I got to deal with here. So, that's football.
And he's going to start bumping into salary cap issues here very, very soon. So he's going to have a hard time keeping that team together. That's what happened to the Seahawks. I mean, several really, really. I remember when Pete Carroll was named coach. And I mean, it's tough to go back. I mean, what is that? 15 years ago? How long has he been coach? But at the same year, I remember Chucky Doll, Gruden was a free agent. He just left, so he was available as a coach, and so was Bill Cowher. And so we had those two coaches available. I'm like, oh my gosh, Bill Cowher at Seattle. Oh my God, any of these guys. So when they named Pete Carroll, and obviously I knew Carroll from being in the Pac-12 facing the Oregon Ducks every year, I was like, why did we just pluck a college coach? But immediately he showed his salt and drafted. And he was able to assess that talent. Had some really good drafts, but in today's era of free agency and salary cap, you've got a window of what 4 to 5 years.
The problem today is you don't have time to develop. You got to win today.
Absolutely.
That's all that matters. Carolina is an excellent example. They went through 17 games with Young. I give him a lot of credit. The kid has a lot of poise, but he has nothing to play with. He has a weak line. He's got weak receivers. He makes some mistakes. He went from college to professional football. I give him a lot of credit, and he kept his composure through the whole thing. And which is why I like a Jordan Love now, because after watching him play for the season, he's very composed on the field. He doesn't have a temper tantrum. He just does what he needs to do, and that's it. And he plays, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, you go from college where there might be one or two exceptional players on each team, and you're the best player on your team, to pro where everybody is the best player. Right. I mean, where linebackers can run you down.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I was very happy. I wish Pete Carroll the best. It is always sad to see the end of an era, but sometimes you need a reset. I personally think Carroll had a couple more seasons in him, and you can tell he thought that too.
Yeah.
But I wish him well. All you can do when a coach brings a Lombardi trophy to your team, after 40 years of nothing, all you can do is say thank you, and I wish you well. I hope he retires, because he is that age. I mean, he's what, 72? He's just but you see it a lot with people who their entire life is spent to coaching and just that routine. And I mentioned in that Gridiron Greats article I wrote about the Hall of Fame barbecue. Yeah. Where I asked Drew Bledsoe what his first season was like, where he didn't report to training camp, and he's like, I went to my place in Montana. I rode out to the middle of a lake in a boat to go fishing, and I just sat there and cried. When that's all you have, I mean, it's tough to give that up, but at some point, live life too, you know?
Exactly. And I know a few players in any sport who've spent from when they were 17 years old until they were 77 years old.
Good point.
One organization as a player, manager, coach, whatever it was, it just doesn't exist. And unless you're in, for example, a small college where you have a niche and you can last there 30 years.
Yes.
And the administration understands you're going to have winning seasons and losing seasons. And you could say, hey, I had a heck of a career. I coached at, whatever university of state for 35 years. I had a pretty good record coaching. We won, 6 or 7 championships. I can't ask for anything more. I had a lot of good guys I coached. A handful of guys actually went to the pros, and that's it. But it,
completely agree.
We're win now team sport concept today in all the team sports. We want to win today. We don't want to wait. We want to build a team. We want to win it today. We'll give up everything for a championship this season, and then we don't win anything for 5 seasons. Oh well, that's it. And then it's sad, but it's true. And football has really super evolved into it now, that it's a win at all cost each season, and it's it's tough to get excited about that year in and year out. I had a very enjoyable experience watching on TV Montana and San Diego State for the small college championship. And San Diego State won. Great game. You could see these guys are real normal players, normal coaching, fans truly excited on both sides. 2 schools people never really ever heard of, except San Diego State, because they win all the time, and he's got a little powerhouse there. Montana looked good, but they didn't weren't able to go and do it, go all the way to even be more competitive in the game. That was a great game to watch. It was a really nice game to watch, as compared to the smash mouth in your mouth type of thing. The celebration after every play, type of situation. So I like to see football again. It's tough. It's tough to watch it. All right, you got some options. Took a little more than when I wanted to here. Let's go into auctions. You got some interesting auctions on some chickles.
I do. Well, as a general rule, we don't want to out any auctions, but I think everybody will realize that there is Memory Lane ends tomorrow, and some really, really high-end chickles up there. I just wanted to share a couple of these because I'm kind of a 35 chickle, 48 leaf, kind of my sweet spot. If you're a longtime listener, my white whale is a uncut 35 chickle sheet. It's what I'd like to see. One of these days, I basically push all my chips in for that. And as I'm searching for how a chickle sheet is even put together, I've searched for miscuts of them. That's how I put the 48 leaf sheet together, even before I found this uncut one over my shoulder, which I will hang on the wall eventually, I promise. And but so I kind of I wrote an article called the love affair between card doctors and 48 leaves for Gridiron, I think 4 or 5 years ago. So I mean, I've been measuring and keeping scans of leaves and chickles for a long time. So when an auction comes up with where is it? This, for example, and I will just throw this card out. This was the first one that I saw. What's your first instinct when you see this card? PSA 8, Hall of Famer, Cliff Battles. What do you see in that card there, Captain?
Well, I see a PSA 8. How many PSA 35 chickles are there? Number one.
Good question.
How did it ever get there? Number two.
Yep.
And I can only imagine the pricing on it. And I was checking a little this morning, and I was a little taken back, for lack of better way of explaining that. So
yeah, and that 35 chickle, that Cliff Battles is at 4,281 right now.
Wow.
So that's a tough card. Look at that border, and this is a newer flip. It's not the old style where some things slipped by the goalie. That border is so bad. I mean, it's just tough. That's a Hall of Fame card. This one, number one in the set. We assume it's going to be upper left corner of the sheet if we can ever find one. This one's not as in your face, but not quite a PSA 8. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but right on his 7, you can see a little bit of dust, paper, whatever it is, but this it's not as bright as I've seen them, and it just doesn't quite jump out at me. Again, a new flip, so it's a little bit newer. This card right now is at $11,491.
Oh my word!
Which is about double the last one of these that went. Wow. So I don't know if more people are looking at it or if they think this one looks good, but oh well, there it is.
Can you enlarge that at all?
No, let me take a look, see. Sorry, I just pulled the curtain back, and yeah, I can. There we go. How's that? What do you think?
All right, I'm not seeing it
on. Yeah, that isn't paper loss. I beg your pardon. I just looked at that on the 7, but this one's not bad, I guess. It's just not as bright as I've seen them, Yeah. Well, let's move on to the next one. I basically ran through all these, but I think I used to own this card because I can remember this stain up in the upper left corner. But yeah, centering off, borders look a little thin. Left and right, left definitely, and just a little bit of staining on the upper left. I don't know. It's just not an attractive 8. And that card right now is at $7,584.
Wow, unbelievable!
Somebody's really trying to put their high-end chickle set together.
Well, you've always said the number's what counts. The higher the number, the better. You know. It's the battle to be number one as far as having the highest grades, so on and so forth. So anything 7, 8, or 9 obviously is going to be run up there as high as possible.
Couldn't agree more. This Ken Strong was really tough. I mean, usually you see a really nice Ken Strong shown the bottom, a nod to near mint Mike Thomas. You can see the bottom of his feet, which is always good on a football card, a cleat shot. But the bottom border of this is almost obscured by the holder of the card. It's so thin. It's there, but that right border is just in tough shape. These are it's tough. And this card is at $3,796 currently.
Unbelievable. I was
Yeah.
at the show probably in 1986, 87, 88, right around that time. The guy had a ton of chickles. I remember buying the Ken Strong, which he graded a X, which I thought was a pretty strong grade for it. I paid $50 for it back then. And I thought that was an incredible sum of money for me to put into a card. But then I also try to rationalize, well, it's a 35 chickle and therefore it's well worth it. So
Yep.
I'm just shocked at the price and grade.
I remember when I had the opportunity to buy a PSA 8 Bronco Nagurski when Fight for Old DC broke up his set. And I owned a PSA 7 that was really nicely centered. I like it. I got it from a friend and another collector. And I thought it was better centered than the 8. And I remember reaching out to several friends with scans of my 7 and the 8 have potential. All this had to happen in 24 hours because he's like, make a decision or I'm going to move on to the next collector. And I remember showing them and I'm like, I like my 7 better than the 8. And one person summed it up for me. They're like, there are 6 PSA 8 Nagurskis exist. And likely not that many more. It's like, this is a PSA 8 Nagurski. This is the cornerstone of any collection. You're buying the flip in this instance. And he was right. So I made the deal. So this Turk Edwards, again, you can, the bottom border is nearly missing, which is tough. And that card is at $5,180.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Just tough. As you're flipping through them, you're just like, man. And then this last one, again, this caught my eye just because it's my beloved 48 leaf set. Yeah. And this Slinging Sammy is one of the reasons I got out of the 48 leaf set. I stopped collecting high end. I still have quite a collection of 48 leaves, but most of them are PSA 4, 5, and 6, and they're fat bordered. But I know in my experience, they are not trimmed. They're fat bordered. And that's where I switched my collection. But this is a PSA 8. But I don't even have to break the calipers out. I know that this is trimmed.
Sure.
Which is tough. That card right now, right there, 7,086, which still a day to go. With the VIG, that's $8,400. Even back in the heyday, this was a $10,000 card. So we're getting there, even though you've seen a lot more of these pop. But again, somebody's out there buying the flip and not the card. I would almost guarantee this card is trimmed.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Stuff.
Really unbelievable. Well, buyer beware. We've said it numerous times over and over again. We said to try to rationalize where this money is going into these cards and trimmed cards, so on and so forth. It's just crazy, truly crazy. The one thing I brought up, and getting a little off script here, and we're going to do a little show and tell, but I jumped on this because it's kind of interesting to me. Can you see this?
No, up a little bit.
You see it now?
Yep.
Okay.
Mayo card.
This is my highest grade Mayo, which is an SGC 50. The bulk of my Mayos are 10, 20s or authentic. And I obviously am not near completing the set. I think I have 19 of the set. So when I look at this card and I compare them to my 10s and 20s, I have 10s and 20s that should be 50s. And I have a 50 that I can't believe that they graded at 50. Now the back is clean, as you can see.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how and why, other than they came up with this when they were grading, or a grader was worried about not giving it a good enough grade because it's such an old card, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And again,
grading, it's gotta be tough to grade those old cards like that, because you're like, I see chipping and stuff like that, but let me look at the definition of what an SGC 30 is. I mean, there's a lot of leeway, in
Right.
lower grades like that.
Right. And again, I think probably now they got their grading much more in order than what they had back then.
Good point.
And it's fascinating to see stuff like that. And I always said, this does nothing for my set other than, make one card out of a 10 or 20 range type of thing. And I can't believe the value of this card now in that condition compared to what I paid for it. And if you remember that card, that was the group of we went in on an auction probably 11 or 12 years ago. And you won some and I won some, and I won that out of that auction with you.
That's right.
Yeah,
that was a long time ago because right after that, Legendary had the highest Mayo set up. And by the way, I'm proud of you, Bob. When we first started doing this podcast, you were pronouncing it Mayo.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm very proud of you. You say Mayo without missing a beat. But because right after that, I bought that very high grade Mayo set, that I held on to for several years, upgraded a few things, then realized I had no passion,
right.
For the set, and sold it.
Right.
So,
and again, it's a fascinating set to me. It's not completable for me because of the Dunlop anonymous card. And again, I was thinking about it, looking at my run, thinking about my run. The big three sets that I never finished were this set, the 35 Chickle, and the 52 large. And again, the 35 Chickle and the 52 large set, I've started and stopped numerous times over the years and just sold everything off and so forth. And the Mayos are the only ones that I still kept on. However, this, if I got a good offer on it, I would probably move it because again, it doesn't fit into a 10 or 20, series of cards because of that. So I don't know. It's interesting. Grading is just so subjective, and it's just every which way, and it's just so sold in our hobby with regards to individuals wanting. That's all they want, so on and so forth, and that's it. So.
And it's widely publicized your views on TPGs, third-party grading, but I would say there is a place for it in the hobby, because I mean, while TPGs may be subjective, it's to a finite point. Let's say 1 out of 50 cards that they grade, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 70, whatever it is, are sliders. Like, that's an 8. That really could have been a 7, and if on a good day, a 9. But if you're buying cards raw from a dealer, boy, now you want to talk about subjectiveness. Somebody trying to sell their cards, there's a real eye on leaning towards higher quality, grades. So while I would say yes, it's a slippery slope. TPGs, the subjectivity of a TPG is, I will take that over that of a dealer selling raw cards, so there's a time and a place for it, which, by the way, I just sent my first submission off to PSA for grading in probably 4 years.
Wow.
I submitted 3 wax packs that are GAI graded for crossovers. So hopefully they will find a home in my wax pack display case in the next couple months.
What's the turnaround time? 2 to 3 years before you get them back?
Bobby made it funny. I like it. It's no, I think with wax packs you have to pick a higher level of service. So I want to say it's like 3 weeks is what they say. But they've got to receive those packs, turn around and ship them off to BBCE, and then they've got to, and then he's got to review them, authenticate them, send them back, and then they've got to grade them and slab them. So they have to hustle on that, I would imagine. But yeah, 3 packs, a 52 Bowman large nickel pack that I think one of the folds, one of the flaps on the back is slightly open, but Who knows? And these are all zero, GAI serial numbers starting with 0 and 1. So back in the day of, Mike Baker at GAI. So they get a little bit better of a reputation. The second pack was a 58 tops nickel pack. Very, very rare nickel pack to have. And they're incredibly expensive. I got a deal on this one and it looks really good. I'd say that one's 75% chance of passing. And then I got a 51 tops magic penny pack, which really obscure set, but I like it.
I actually seen several 51 tops magic packs years ago at various shows back on the East Coast. So they, for whatever reason, I still say, because Tops was out of Duryea, Pennsylvania, and they also used federal paperboard in New Haven to cut a lot of their cards. It seems like the tri-state area at one time had a lot of Top stuff floating around still in circulation. But that is one pack I actually saw in person and was held, and it was a pretty cool thing to.
Nice. Yeah, that East Coast bias for a lot more vintage football cards roaming around than the West Coast.
Oh yeah. And I can tell down here too in the Carolinas, there is just not much vintage in any way, shape, or form anywhere. So it's been a true education for me when I set up at shows down here. A lot of guys never seen what I have, and I'm constantly explaining to them, what it is, type of thing. And I'm just very fascinated when a fellow dealer who I think has some strong knowledge. They have a good knowledge of baseball cards. They have very little knowledge of football cards. The last show I was at, and stop me if I said this story, but I don't think I did. I had a bunch of 60 and 61 Fleer football, a pile of them. They were all commons, various conditions, and he ended up buying them from me. And he kept saying, "Explain to me again, what's it, 4 years? Which years do I have here?" And I said, 60, 132 cards. The 61 is the big set because you had both the NFL and the AFL players, and then the 288 card sets, 60. And he says, he said, I honestly have not, he said, I saw 60 Fleer baseball, but I've never seen Fleer football. So he said, I wanted to have them for him. And they weren't that many, they were probably 25.
Yeah.
So,
that's interesting. I mean, you told the story a long time ago about, a dealer who had football, but he hated it. He's like, just give me $10 for it and get it out of here.
Well, it was the $5 cheese box back in the 80s and the early 90s. And they had to cooking when they went in the back. They got the cheese box. They gave it to me.
Didn't you find some football in a dumpster once that somebody threw out rather than haul home after a show?
At a show, I was walking outside, and this is no lie. The dumpster was open. There was like a big cardboard box in there, and for whatever reason, I walked over to it, and there was all football cards there. And this was like 1986, 87. And there were mostly like 1980s cards in there. And some of them were in bad condition. Others were fine. So I dumpster dived. I took the box out. I put it in I had a truck at the time. I put it in my truck and I sorted through it. I mean, I did throw out some of the cards that were bad.
You said you found a perfectly good sandwich in there too that you ate.
Yeah, it was. It was very, very good. I had lunch on the way home. But I am just shocked at seeing it. I've seen at Nationals, guys open up packs and they just throw the cards out if they don't get anything. It just scares me. It just scares me.
You've had such a head start. I mean, I'm lucky, humbled enough to be a co-host of this podcast with you. And obviously, I put senior. I really capitalized the senior contributing writer this time. I'll work on something directed at Jeff Payne next podcast. I'm gunning for you, Jeff. But I'm a relative newbie to the hobby. I mean, because I collected as a kid, but 1999 is when I rediscovered the hobby. My sister gave me a Largent card, and then I found eBay, and around 2001 found the CU chat boards. So I mean, 2 decades I've been in the hobby, and I'm lucky enough to bump into people like you and the Spanos and Beckers of the world to you know, to get me into vintage stuff. But I mean, you know, so when I hear you telling stories from the mid '80s about being at card shows, it's like,
Well, it was like I said, and many times I would set up at a card show, and I had three levels of pricing. I had a nickel, I had a quarter, I had 50 cents. I might have had a few dollar cards here and there. And I would have guys, very normal guys, go through the nickel box. They pull the cards they needed. Back then, set collecting was much more prevalent. So guys were trying to finish their sets. Some guys were team collectors, so they would pick up any, for example, back then, Patriots, Giants, Jets cards for their collection. And I got that. I understood that. And some guys were superstar collectors. For example, '84, a couple guys were really hot on Elway. A couple guys were really hot on Marino. They said these guys are going to be really good. They would go around buy whatever they had, so on and so forth. And today, the hobby has changed so dramatically that I just get tired of seeing the phone gets pulled out, and I got guys say to me, "Oh, you're right on the price for that." I said, "Well, that's good to know." I said, "I think I should be right on the price." And I said, "What's the point of me if the card is only worth $50? Why would I put $500 on the price of the card? Therefore, you tell me." And they don't know what to say. And they said, "Well, this is what we go by." I said, "Well, you could also educate yourself with pricing, and you wouldn't need the phone. If you did some studying and some background on it, and buy the card. If you really like the card, you like the design of the card, or the condition of the card. I mean, buy it. And I'm kind of shocked at that. It happened at the National a lot. The Wilmington show, it happens. I know the guys are going to do it, so I don't say anything to them anymore.
Yes.
But I do engage a few of them. But again, the story at the National was just mind-boggling, where the guy says, "Well, I got to make some money on this." I said, "Well, that's fine." I said, "I didn't realize I could only sell it to dealers. I thought I could sell it to people who collect
There's
cards."
a 10% discount for dealers to allow for their profit margin.
I didn't realize I was supposed to be your bank so you can make money.
Wow.
Whatever.
Well, what do you got for show and tell there, Captain? Why don't you lead the way, sir?
I did an article in this upcoming issue of Gridiron Greats magazine on Street and Smith football magazines from 1940 to 1962, which is when they were only the for one edition. They didn't have the college edition. So I want to show a few. I had a couple guys ask me to do the article, and I did it. And I know I showed this the last time. This is the 1949 Charlie Justice issue.
Yep.
And again, this
my
is
favorite nickname in all football, Charlie Choo Choo Justice.
The quarterly was the autumn issue. That was the Street and Smith that year. So collectors got to remember that.
Where do you keep all those? Because magazines are not easy as a program collector. I know those are not easy to store in bulk.
I basically have plastic bags with backings, and I have basically just boxes set up with them. I just took on a big Sports Illustrated collection from a guy who actually did a beautiful job of storing them. And he just got tired of it. And I told him, I'm looking more for the football issues for my collection. But he had everything from A to Z, so I got everything from him. But it's great reading the early issues of Sports Illustrated, because there was a lot of non-team sport articles in them. There was sport articles on fishing, hunting, boating, golf, tennis, so on and so forth. And this is the Big O, Johnny Ozleski from California. And this is the 1952 edition. Look at that. That's
pristine.
Yeah.
That is in really good shape. I can still see the sheen on that.
Yeah.
The cover.
So this is the 1952 issue.
What year was that, Bob?
I'm sorry?
What year was that?
52. These are just great historical pieces. I mean, besides classic covers of what you have, and this is Leon Hart, famous issue from, again, this was the 1950 issue of Pick Quarterly, which at that time they called themselves All-Star Sports Football. All right. And then I got a 1951 issue with the Masked Marvel Bobby Smith out of Texas.
Oh, man,
This is a cool cover.
that's really cool. The good Heisman pose. Look at that.
Classic cover. I love the classic poses. And then I got a 1946 Mr. Ferrara out of USC.
Wow.
And this is a pretty classic magazine, in my opinion, because it's right after World War II. If you look at the back, they never sold an ad for the back cover. That's how tight things were at that time.
Wow.
So there was no ad on the back of that cover.
On any of them?
1946. And then this one's a beat up 1943 with Steve Jeswick, who played for Santa Clara. This is a war issue. Knows how it's all taped on the side.
Yeah.
He didn't pay much for this at all. But if you look at the back or war bond ad, pretty interesting.
That's really cool.
So these are my earliest.
That's really cool.
Earliest Street and Smiths. I wrote about them in the GG. And
How
again,
do they smell? How do they smell, Bob? Old periodicals like that. How do they smell?
Horribly. And I just don't understand how, and I did write in the article, and it hopefully is in the process of being mailed today. So everybody should begin in the beginning of next week. Excuse me, the prices of Street and Smiths have dropped dramatically, with the exception of roughly the 1940 to 45 issues, which are still somewhat tough to come by. I've held the entire collection several times, and I broke them up over the years. I've sold copies. I had guys ask me, I really need, and literally everybody's always asked me, I need 1940 to 44 or 45 in good condition. What do you have, type of thing. And knowing that they were putting it together, I had no problem selling it to them. But again, I really don't see right now any older Street and Smiths locally here at the shows I've attended. I saw a few from the 80s, and that's about it. So when I brought a bunch of 70s to one show, and one guy had a field day because he says, I don't see these at all. And
nice.
He was looking for particular college covers, more of the SEC Southern college teams on the cover. So
when did that stop being published?
Now that's difficult to I have a mixed what's the word I'm trying to use? I can't confirm when they stopped and when they restarted. Apparently they restarted, but I'm not sure. And apparently they stopped when the company got bought out, and apparently they just went to like a website or some sort. I have all the conflicting information on that, so I really don't know. I stopped technically roughly 2005, 2006, right around that time. And just for a variety of reasons, I didn't like, there was nothing there to read, you know. I'd rather spend that money and buy publications from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that had more, you know, meaning and value to me.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, but getting back to value of publications, I still don't understand why they're so beaten up. And again, collectors or speculators will have no problem spending thousands of dollars on a brand new graded card of, say, Zach Wilson or somebody, and a 1940 Street and Smiths football magazine has literally no value to it. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me, to say the least. So I wanted to show that to our audience and have us look at it. Joe, I'm going to hand off to you, and we're
well,
time here, so we got to.
Considering Christmas just happened, I wanted to bring in this. There you go. This is a Christmas Day 1925 program, Red Grange's Chicago Bears.
Wow.
This program is coming up on 100 years old. Smells good. It is in almost pristine shape.
Wow.
Just beautiful. So obviously this is yeah, I mean, a very rare one. Barnstorming game, Christmas, and the Coral Gables Collegians. I'm going to read off a couple names here that you might recognize. Charlie Berry was the team captain.
Wow.
Jack Ernst, Hoot Flanagan, Duke Osborne, Babe Parnell, and a young hammer you might recognize, Tony Latone. And it was said also at some point that Grange on one of their games played an older Jim Thorpe. And he actually was quoted as saying he was really, really good. I can only imagine what he was like 10 years ago. But this thing is in literally just perfect shape. It's still got George Hallis playing. He's listed as number 7 as an end. Ed Healy, George Trafton, who would and then Harold Red Grange. It's funny. I was showing this to my son, and he's like, "Was Red his name?" And I'm like, "No, his name was Harold." He's like, "No wonder he went by Red." kind of laugh. I'm like, "Yeah." And then somehow or another, Bo Jackson came up, and he's like, "Is his name really Bo?" And I'm like, "No, his name is." I couldn't remember, and I had to Google it. Do you remember what Bo Jackson's real name is?
I've been asked this several times, and I've always come up blank because I never really.
Vincent.
Vincent, that's right. Vincent Bojack.
Right. I had to look it up too, Bob, so don't worry. All right. But I absolutely love this Christmas Day program. It is in almost pristine shape. And then I'm going to take us back. Speaking of Jim Thorpe, perfect segue. This is a lineup card from 1908, where Minnesota plays Carlisle. And a very young Jim Thorpe is the left halfback in the lineup. So 1908 lineup card. This would be one of the first years that Thorpe played in. I bought this probably 10, 12 years ago. And John Spano did me a favor and had this authenticated at a national. I mailed it to him. And he walked it up personally and had it authenticated and sent it to me. So one of my favorite things in my collection, a 1908 lineup card from the Carlisle Indians against Minnesota. And it just reminds me of Spano. I'm really enjoying. We're starting to get boxes back from the restoration company who grabbed some of my stuff, cleaned it, and stored it. I took a lot of the valuable stuff away, but a lot of the the notebooks and stuff with the loose cards and stuff, I just let them store rather than me haul around. Yeah. So I'm really starting to have fun unboxing some stuff and oh yeah. So I've started 2 piles. This is what I'm going to consign and get rid of. I've evolved. I no longer am interested in that. And then reissuing my love of collections. But yeah, absolutely love that. So that's it. I had 2 items I wanted to share. I was really excited about those 2. I've had them sitting on my desk for a couple of weeks waiting for the next podcast.
Real quick, it's very interesting when you pack stuff up. When I had we were moving, I had everything packed for over 5.5 months, and it was like
totally. I
just felt so much better when I got it back in my possession and started opening up and realized that everything was there on top of it. It was very, very nice to see again. It was very, very comforting to me to see everything again, so on and so forth. Hey, we're almost out of time. Just a couple quick things. I'm working on 2 guests. Hopefully, we can work out time frames over the next couple of weeks. And new issue of Gridiron Greats is out, and it will be it's in the mail, and it will be available online. It's available. The PDFs are available online already. And again, if you're not a subscriber to Gridiron Greats magazine, what are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for? If you're watching this podcast and you're not a subscriber, seriously, you've got your priorities wrong. Do you put your shoes on before your pants in the morning? Come on.
Gotta subscribe. That's all I have, Joe. Quick last thoughts.
Playoffs starting. NFL playoffs. I will admit, somebody made fun of me on our vintage football chat rooms that I am a fair weather fan, and I will admit the sprint to the finish line, moving into our house and wrapping up those little 10% details has been a little distracting. I didn't even know the Seahawks lost their last games and missed out on the playoffs. I had a friend text me the lineup and he's like, "What's this E next to the Seahawks mean?" I'm like, "I think it means eliminated." And he's like, "Yeah, you're exactly right, Joe. It means eliminated."
That can be excused with everything you had go on. And I appreciate taking time out because I hear you guys are getting a big storm coming up too on top
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah,
So,
kids are out at noon today. It's 11:30 our time, so I'm going right from here to pick up the kids. Early dismissal.
All right. That's
A
it.
little bit of snow. People panic.
We'll see you next week. Take care.
Love it.